I made some changes to the Moodle. Well, here are some photos of us, and you can see how well, so Josh, he works in Estonia, but that's not Estonia. That's Austria. Right. Right. One of my slides. That's Estonia. Yeah. There it goes. Well, that's because we went skiing in Austria. I'm very proud of that. Which, I only invite people to come speak for my course who ski with me. That's the policy. So, but I made some changes at the Moodle. It's been a work in progress. Here we are at session 4. So next week, I thought of asking Al to give his talk next week already, but I thought, no, actually, I want to give another talk first, another kind of, well, regarding my topics, and so that'll be next week, and I'll talk to you about the assigned reading for next week. It's called Gender Acceleration. It's in the Anarchist Library. I'll mention it after Josh's talk. And you look further down. So these are the condensed, this is the condensed Moodle, but of course, if you click the arrows on the Moodle, it'll give you the drop down, and there's more details about what's going to be happening during each session. And you'll notice, as I mentioned already, yeah, Ludmila says she's got to go, but she'll see if she says hello to Josh, and she'll watch the YouTube recording, which I recommend to all. And to like and subscribe and to share. I mentioned Professor Nicholchina consented to give a talk for us later. I think this will be the highlight, probably, not to detract from Josh's talk by any means, but Professor Nicholchina spoke at the summer school on the topic of technological singularity in video games. And she thinks that we have a lot to learn from these video games, which seem to be trying to tell us something about what's coming. Yeah, so that should be cool. You'll notice in session 8, this excursion to Prague. Basically, we have certification to drive. We can take some vans or just our car. Probably not more than one van. Anyway, they'll pay for our gas so we can drive and go to some electronic music show or something. That's probably the idea. And probably none of you want to go with us, but it's okay because we'll say it's an excursion and therefore the university will pay for our gas. But if you want to come with us, then you can. But this date is not set, and I'm not sure what show we're going to go to, probably Cross Club. Okay. You can share your screen, Josh. J. Augustus Bacigalupi is a junior research fellow at the University of Tartu in the Department of Semiotics and Culture Studies. As a PhD candidate under the supervision of Kalevi, Kull, and Donald Favareau, his research in biosemiotics is focused on semiogenesis, which, via a novel system theoretic model, explores the transfinite virtual potential of relevant noise in the continuous, irreducible, and irreversible process of semiosis. More generally, this exploration of semiosis intends to contribute to a more complete and coherent understanding of sentience in living beings. If you have questions for Josh, please feel free to put them down in the chat, and we'll review them after the talk.
Okay. Thanks, Tyler. Yeah, it's great to be here. And can you guys see my title slide okay?
Yeah, it's perfect.
Great. Yeah, so excellent. So I have 2 screens here. In the spirit of Tyler sort of exploring the whole Zoom experience, when you see the side of my face, I'm actually looking at my own slide on the big screen. But my notes are over here, so I will mostly be looking straight at you guys. In any case, yeah, cybersemiotics, really interested in continuing on this conversation, inspired by Breer, and exploring how it is we go beyond cybernetics, be inspired by cybernetics, but then go beyond it. This talk will be split into 4 parts. the question of cybersemiotics, just a quick overview of sort of the relevant aspect of cybersemiotics for this talk. And then we'll dig into the theory of cybernetics. And what I mean by the theory of cybernetics is second order cybernetics. And we'll dig into the legacy of that. And then we'll move from the theory to the reality of cybernetics, looking at 4 use cases, if you will, of actual applied, or most of them are applied. One of them will be still theory, but anyway, very contemporary. And then based on that, we'll then revisit the question. Have we answered the question? Have we addressed Breer's desire, efforts, including our own, of course, to move, build off of cybernetics, but move beyond it? Okay, so start with a quote. Breer finds both C.S. Peirce's semiotic triad logic and Jakob von Uexküll's Umweltlehre, I think that's how you say that, to be particularly helpful correctives to the explanatory, unsatisfactory, two-valued logic of organism-environment duality, still endemic to much cybernetic theory. For example, Maturana and Varela, he notes, see autopoietic living systems as closed in their spatial and temporal organization and reproduction. They are only open to the world through their structural couplings with it. Multicellular organisms are second-order couplings among cells, and societies are third-order couplings among organisms. Nicholas Luhmann turns this into a view of social organizations as autopoietic systems created by communities. Yet he too has conceptualized the 3 biological, psychological, and socio-communicative levels as closed systems. Although they are present in human being and functioning between them, there is no direct interconnection between them. So this is from Favareau's actual essential readings of biosemiotics, his summarization. He's quoting, Favareau's quoting Breer, who is then quoting Maturana and Varela. And what we want to kind of focus on here is at the functional, or what the enactivist would call operational closure, i.e. a fixed set point. But then how are functions derived and to what end? And who or what sets the set point. So we're getting into the idea of goals, and how it is the system orients itself, and this will become a central thread throughout this talk. Another helpful quote I feel in orienting our discussion on cybersemiotics is again from Favareau, quote, understanding the interpenetration taking place between such multiply embedded and interdependent systems is the project of Breer's cybersemiotics, which weds insights from second-order cybernetic theory with insights from Jakob von Uexküll's Umweltlehre and from C.S. Peirce's systemic logic of sign relations. So this is kind of the question, I suppose, to frame our investigation. And now what we'll do is we'll dig into the, so what are the insights from second order cybernetics? And then later in the talk, we'll talk about how that works with C.S. Peirce and von Uexküll's contributions. But first, let's start with first order cybernetics. For example, this image here is a simple sort of abstraction of what might be considered a simple thermostat. For example, can you guys see my cursor?
Yeah, it looks good. That's a very cool slide, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, just sketched it up, I think, I don't know, a couple of days ago, but it's definitely been wanting to find ways to really articulates abstractly but clearly like what it is, for example, a thermostat's doing, because it's fundamentally a cybernetic system. In other words, there's this this fixed set point set by the external agent, like the designer or the engineer, and or in the case of the thermostat would be the user. So they want the temperature higher or lower. They set that, and then what the system does, this is what the system automatically is doing, is it's oscillating kind of like a proto, if you will, or pseudo homeostasis. The system measures how far it is from this set point and then steers back towards it. Steering is a key concept in cybernetics. Cybernetics comes, the actual term, the etymology comes from the Greek to steer. I think actually it's technically, or a steersman, someone on a river steering a boat. So you can imagine this, the boatman wants to end up at the dock over here, and you're in the first order cybernetics, you're steering around your course, trying to maintain being on course. And so, for example, in this example of the thermostat, there is an inside and an outside of the system, right? So the inside of the system is what's happening here with this correction, the automated correction. The outside is what has been like the user setting the set point on this internal closed system. The system is structurally coupled to its environment via a one-to-one sensor. It's sensing the temperature in this example, and its set point is set by an external user or observer. Okay, so second order cybernetics. This is quite a bit of a simplification, but I want to, again, try and boil it down to what I think is the critical distinction for the purposes of our understanding today. But the key difference is right here. It's a non-fixed set point, so that the set point can change. But here's the critical move. But instead of it being an external user, like someone setting their thermostat, because you can change that too. But the critical move here is that it's somehow that the system intrinsically, that the agency, so to speak, that the system modifies its own set point based on whatever mechanisms. Well, we'll explore a number of examples shortly. So here we have all that was in first order cybernetics, but now the set point is not set by some external agent, but by an internal observer. I say quote unquote internal observer because that becomes important later for von Forester's understanding of cybernetics. Ostensibly, the agency is now inside what was once outside the system, but how? So now we can go all the way back to 1979 and von Forester's assertion that in answering that question of but how is it possible to get the outside observer inside the agency, inside the system itself? He responds to this question, quote, "It is most gratifying for me to report to you that the essential conceptual pillars for a theory of the observer have been worked out. The one is a calculus of infinite recursions," and I'll come back to that. The other one is a calculus of self-reference. Don't have time for that. With these calculi, we are now able to enter rigorously a conceptual framework which deals with observing and not only with the observed. So there's that move where the thermostat, so to speak, the nest, your nest thermostat is observing you and setting itself instead of you just manually setting it from the outside. And then furthermore, in a second order stipulation, the observer enters the system by stipulating his own purpose. This is in this age of pronoun, attention to pronoun. It's actually quite notable, like that we sort of have to be careful with is it its own purpose, or what is the pronoun referring to? I mean, this is kind of the central question in a sense. Okay, so let's follow up. So this calculus of infinite recursions, there's a reference, and we can for slightly go down the rabbit hole of what is infinite recursion. So going into that reference, which is Forrester himself with co-author Weston earlier in 1973, artificial intelligence and machines that understand. Very humble title. But here he qualifies, here they qualify themselves. Can machines be intelligent? Can machines think and understand? These are questions of epistemology, okay? Since the concepts of intelligence, thinking, and understanding have been thought of until recently only in the context of mental activity in Homo sapiens or other species, these questions should only be asked when we know what we mean by intelligence or thinking, or when we have an understanding of understanding. Note the nested quotation marks there. It's very intentional. The formulation in quotes suggests that the fundamental issue associated with these concepts is the epistemology of recursion. This is a concept that is of concepts being applied to themselves. Excuse me. So here, this little image that I have here is in the introduction of this paper, they go through an informal derivation, arriving at this recursive feedback, in essence, where they're defining cognition, which doesn't seem to heed all their caveats up here about not digging into thinking and cognition until we understand understanding. But here we go anyway. Cognition is computations of ad infinitum. So this is actually a kind of a powerful concept that we may have time to talk about later. But but in summary, they hedge their bet a bit here by going from an ontological strong claim to one of epistemology, or what we can know, maybe not what we are. In any case, he goes on to make claims about cognition itself being a recursion of computations. This assumption hasn't really changed much in the last 50 years, I have to say. But let's interrogate that. Let's move to the next section and look at some actual pragmatic cybernetics in reality. All right. So before we get to today's AIs and stuff, which we will, but let's go back to oh shoot, what year is this? I forget. I should have put the reference. My apologies. But this is Ashby's homeostat, which is actually a great example. It's totally analog, and it's prior to of course, prior to all the digital implementations that we see today. And it's a really neat system that essentially, upon perturbation by an external perturbation, its internal dynamics will be put out of whack, and in order to get back to its intended operating dynamics, it'll actually have random selectors, like to be able to go from one resistor value to another resistor value to another resistor value until it brings back its own internal dynamics within operational, intended by the external designer operational dynamics. So what I want to suggest is that this is non-fixed, yet a solipsistic set point. It's an array of randomly chosen resistors chosen a priori by the designer to stabilize internal dynamics upon external perturbation. This idea of, so I'll go through each of these examples of, cybernetics over the last century over the last 50 years, and characterize them as either, fixed, non-fixed, or solipsistic or non-solipsistic. I'd call this one non-fixed in a sense because it can actually change its internal operations. It's a bit debatable, but we'll get into those subtleties with subsequent examples. It is, however, solipsistic. I mean, its set point is completely intrinsic. Once the designer picks the resistor values and decides what constitutes proper operations, it's really just an external stochastic random perturbation that decides, so to speak, whether it resets itself. So I would suggest that the internal set point is internal. So in other words, solipsistic. So this is just a start, first of 4 examples, so that we can get some insights of what we can glean in Breer's sort of spirit, what we can glean from cybernetics. Again, starting with this kind of a taxonomy, if you will, of fixed or solipsistic. So I've covered everything else. Let's move on to the next example. All right, machine learning, like coming right up to today. Here, the system is more subtle in its solipsism. Here, I'd say it's fixed, and I'll dig into that as well. And is it non-solipsistic because it gets data from external data sets? It's definitely an interesting question. But basically, in summary, how the system works is that via forward propagation of, so it has massive data sets and, let's say, handwritten integers, and then it goes through this high dimensional, in other words, it has lots of, astronomically high number of possible settings that these weights and biases could have in the network. And all these pixels are let's say 784 pixels are put into the system, and then this is just one of many, many training examples that would be put in there. And then it's fed forward. There's all these algorithms that feed these forward. And at first, the system necessarily is randomized, right? So all these weights and balances have to be randomized. That's an important step. So at first, it's going to operate horribly, right? So at first, it's going to do something completely random. And then what the system does is it does the cost function. It calculates the cost function, which is just essentially assessing the difference between these values and the intended value. So this is what's known as supervised learning. So it's tagged. All the data is tagged. Like the system, for purposes of training, knows that this is a 7, right? So it says, hey, this is where we're supposed to be, and this is where we are. This is the deltas between here are really big. So then what happens is a different set of algorithms called backpropagation that then say, hey, based on all these deltas, all these differences between where it is we are and where it is we want to be, the set point, go back and modify all these possible connections. And that's a whole nother story of how it's actually really fascinating how that works. But it's feedback. It's a feedback loop, right? So, but is it second order? That's sort of the open question for all of these examples. So via forward propagation, the cost function and gradient descent, and optimized high dimensional polynomial function is near monotonically cohered upon based on massive training data. So what I mean by that is that essentially the output isn't what's actually created by these systems. Is, in a sense, it's an automated thermostat creator, whereas the thermostat has a really simple equation, relatively simple equation that it generates in order to do what it is I sketched earlier, to be able to sort of homeostatically stay around the fixed point. What these systems in essence are doing is essentially generating, through this backpropagation that I told you about, generate a an equation. It generates a super high, a polynomial equation, ax squared plus, bx plus, a constant, but it's like many, 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 many terms. And what that equation is doing, that super high dimensional, high degree equation is doing is basically when it gets a brand new handwritten 7, it's able to classify that. And which is pretty much the basis of machine learning. So based on all this, I'll grant it being a non-solipsistic status provisionally because its eventual set point is due to structure in large data sets about the world. So there's structure in the world that's being essentially gleaned by this whole process, and then very structurally, and a very sort of in essence, it's like implementing structuralism in a sense with all these differences. So it's a feedback of differences to generate this output. What's interesting is that the output again is a fixed. It's second order. We have to be careful here how we use second order. I mean, it's second order in the sense that it's an automated system of creating another, bespoke tool that itself is actually rather fixed and solipsistic, but the process by which it got there is open to its environment. But keep in mind that once this high degree polynomial has been crystallized, and it has been crystallized, it has been fixed, it is a fixed internal function that does not generalize. And we can talk more about that later. Let's move on. Okay, Deacon's autogen. This one's really interesting. Well, first of all, because it's the only one out of all 4 that actually tries to imagine an actual thermodynamic system. We won't be talking about that much, but what we want to do is characterize it in terms of how we've been characterizing all these systems. And what I want to suggest is that it's actually pretty fixed. It's actually a fixed solipsistic set point. In other words, the system's successful reconstitution is predicated on repeating the same intrinsic cyclic dynamic. And that's really interesting. And in a similar kind of way, you have this kind of on-off logic that's found throughout the cybernetic literature. And Tyler, did you want to ask a question now?
So this is the autogen is something that Deacon came up with in his 2012 book about the emergence of life, or the simplest possible a unit of life, or something like that. Can you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sure. Yeah. No. Good quote. Yeah. So actually, he came up with it a bit earlier, but yeah, it definitely was a central feature in his Incomplete Nature 2012 book. But it's a model. What he was trying to do is, in the simplest terms, characterize the emergence of semiosis in essence. So how it is semiosic information, how it is the system can, in essence, at the very least, be about itself. And again, we're right on the edge here of abiogenesis. In other words, right on the edge between just pure physics and chemistry, and then what say Kalevi would say, for example, there's no physiosemiosis, it's just physics and chemistry. Then at the birth of something like this, something like Deacon's proposing, there would be semiosis or some kind of biosemiosis, and that those are coextensive. There's all sorts of really interesting arguments to have to complicate that. But for the purposes of this talk on cybernetics, Deacon's model is really illustrative of this sort of this kind of how it is constraints are a fundamental aspect, and work need to be a fundamental part of the conversation. And so for that, this model is really very, very helpful. But at the end of the day, what I want to suggest for the purposes of cybersemiotics and really like what are the insights we can take from cybernetics, it in our taxonomy as we've sort of I've developed it so far, it's notable, I think, that that Deacon's autogen is pretty solipsistic, that the set point is its own dynamic. And this gets to the whole lineage, the whole like of autopoiesis, right? Going back to Maturana Varela and Breer's critique of Maturana and Varela is that one of the major, and part of the reason why I chose the term solipsistic is because it's actually a critique that's been brought against Maturana and Varela, their autopoiesis, that it's self-making, right? That there's a lot more interpenetration going on, a lot more ambiguity between inside and outside that a lot of semioticians feel that needs to happen. So, but nevertheless, this model really helps us, I think, move that conversation forward. Let me check my notes here. Yeah, so its substrate molecules may change. So this is interesting. Like the physics, actually, the actual molecules actually change all the time. And Deacon really likes to make this point regularly. The substrates change all the time, but what doesn't change, and in the midst of all this change, is this dynamic. This dynamic is sustained continuously. He argues it's a kind of proto-autopoiesis, as I was suggesting before, proto-homeostasis. But its set point, although dynamic, is internally fixed. Like the homeostat, its only relevant coupling to its environment is, again, ostensibly stochastic, a stochastic perturbation to perturb these shells, to break them open, to then reclose. And then Deacon has other models that I actually helped him develop that are more complex. But still, this first step is fundamentally stochastic, like the homeostat. Okay, final example. This is an interesting example. Well, first of all, because lots of people refer to it, I see it. It's really quite popular in the literature and across many disciplines. I mean, all the way from medical journals to some of our own semioticians are really interested in building off of this model. And there's certainly a lot we can learn from it. Not the least of which is because I don't know how much Carl Friston actually knew of von Uxküll, but I mean, he certainly, action perception cycles are, of course, rather common in a number of different disciplines. But I just wanted to put von Uxküll's, functional circle here. Not the least of which is because there is a very clear mapping between sensations in the world as sensed and action as the effector world of action, and the inner world, the Innenwelt here, and then the Umwelt, here. And how we define these things is I think von Uxküll is more subtle. Well, there's a whole lot of differences that I'll get into in the next section about the differences. But just to work with our taxonomy for a moment, this model is definitely more complex. Is it really fixed? Is it really solipsistic? I mean, it does continually gets information. It gets data. Let's properly in terms of any real implementations that have been done so far. It's digital systems are implementing these fixed algorithms. So that's important to emphasize, is that these are fixed algorithms that implement statistical models whose goal is a utility function to minimize surprisal. Okay, so what it wants to basically do is it has its own. It develops via Bayesian statistical analysis and Markov blankets, just different statistical tools. It essentially generates a model. Maybe we could say very loosely, in the spirit of like how AI generates its own model. But unlike the AI example where what is generated is fixed, is a crystallized algorithm that then is used as a tool, a fixed tool. The active inference is, active in the sense that it's ongoing. It's certainly one of the closest examples of, von Forester's understanding of this idea of recursive computation, where the system essentially is continuously updating its own model, because as it's getting new information from its environment, its surprisal goes up. In other words, its unexpected inputs go up as compared to its model, and so it has to change its model. And so this is a really interesting system. However, it's really important to note that no new terms in the internal model will change based on these novel inputs. This model is fixed, like all these different equations, and certainly its intrinsic utility functions to minimize surprisal is fixed. So in that sense, it's actually, again, it has these layers of complication, and perhaps it can do some really interesting things. But at the end of the day, I would still put it squarely within this grouping of 4 examples in terms of its fixed nature. And so, but the question remains then, based on all of these examples, can veritable semiosis be entailed in such systems, any of these systems? Can we understanding with just these cybernetic models? Okay, moving on to the last section. Let's revisit, let's remember our original question, now that we've looked into some cybernetics, and repeat Favareau's characterization of Breer's project of cybersemiotics. Quote, understanding the interpenetration taking place between such multiply embedded and interdependent systems is the project of Breer's cybersemiotics, which weds insights from second-order cybernetic theory with insights from Jacob von Utzkel's Umweltlehre and from C.S. Peirce's systemic logic of sign relations. All right, so let's quickly in this last section look at some Utzkel and Peirce. All right, starting with Peirce, because I think it's really relevant to where I left off with the active inference example. Peirce argues, or I guess I argue, using Peirce, to move towards a cybersemiotics, we need an unambiguously non-fixed and non-solipsistic set point. What does it mean for a semiotic system to be meaningfully about both itself and something other than itself, continuously sustaining embedded interpenetration? At the very least, as Peirce argues, the evolution of the semiotic system must be non-stochastically and non-algorithmically novel. And so that's to contrast with even perhaps one of the more complex examples of cybernetics, which is algorithmic and stochastic. Okay.
That quote, okay, so that last sentence is indeed Dawn.
No, sorry, this is me. Like this is
that's you.
Me commenting on, to try and sort of contrast.
Because initially I saw the Peirce citation, I was like, really?
Yeah.
I don't know those words. Go on.
Here's Favareau, and then this is me quoting Peirce. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, let's quickly look at from an Utzkelian point of view. Let's look at what animals are really doing. This is a really interesting paper that was done studying bees on how it is they navigate, how it is they fly, which is not just one action perception, cycle, but many. It's more than one cybernetic feedback loop. Contrary to popular belief, a lot of people just sort of look at the one diagram over here of the functional cycle and think, oh yeah, okay, that's all it is. Like, no, von Uexküll is quite aware that it was multiple, that the bee has to, for example, assess distance to flowers and the ground, its speed of travel, where it's been so far, where it's headed. The orientation of the sun is actually really important for not only bees' real-time ability to fly around, but also go back to the hive and orient other bees to be able to find that. So there's like, what a mess. I mean, how is this? Because keep in mind, like this is all real time, right? All these multiple functional cycles are happening in real time to not only be perceiving, this is just, I've just described the perception side, but then von Uexküll's model is also about action. So in real time, the bee is constituting all manner of coordinated activities, like moving its legs in a way to balance its body, to balance its flying, let alone its wings, and it's looking and it's steering. This is already a massive coordination problem for this little bee brain. And so all these real-time stimulations and actions are superposed in real time. So we need more than mere one-to-one structural couplings, right? We need to move beyond. We can learn from the sort of thermostat-like structural couplings, but those are very one-to-one functional fixed relationships. But we need more than that. Von Uexküll himself says, by a stroke of magic, the sum of the impulses that appear creates around us the whole vast world of color and sound. Our experience is multiple. It's radically multiple. Peirce, I think relatedly, says that cynicism is founded on the notion that the coalescence, the becoming continuous, the becoming governed by laws, the becoming instinct with general ideas are but phases of one and the same process of the growth of reasonableness. Okay, so and then also he says, this is also important, abduction sort of is an answer to, okay, well, how is this possible? Peirce's answer is, abduction is the process of forming an explanatory hypothesis. It is the only logical operation which introduces any new idea. For induction does nothing but determine a value, and deduction merely evolves the necessary consequences of a pure hypothesis. So it's important to note that all my examples of cybernetics earlier are in this area here of induction and deduction. There is no abduction. There is no abduction. I can't emphasize that enough. And that critical to that abduction is that like the ability to create something truly new. In other words, if the active inference algorithm could generate new equations for itself, to change its whole conception of what a surprisal is and how to navigate it, that's what we're trying to get to. But again, how does the organism harness the singular and novel efficacious action in response to innumerable simultaneous inputs? In other words, how does it come to the singular action based on all this? Maelstrom. So I want to just really quickly, and just a couple more slides here. I want to, I don't know if this is in your guys' way. So Edgar Allan Poe's story, a descent into the maelstrom, is really interesting, and I think a helpful example. The idea that what Poe's trying to describe is how it is. So this sailor was in a shipwreck, and his ship is completely destroyed, and all his compatriots, perish. And he survives in this story through what Poe describes is ratiocination. Basically, the idea to to perceive the environment and to make choices, even in the face of the maelstrom. And so Poe discusses how that might be possible. Just as an illustration, it's the ability to discern the useful, the asymmetries, the subtle pieces of order or aspects of the chaotic environment that might provisionally and hypothetically, in an adductive kind of way, be useful. And so that a path can be discerned based on these potentially rather subtle cues in an otherwise very chaotic maelstrom. Second to last slide. So coming back to von Uexküll and Peirce, the indeterminate contingencies of the world are, quote, an external rhythm which enters into competition with the internal rhythm of the animal, right? So, and what I want you to imagine is that rhythm, when you think of rhythm, think of the maelstrom, think of this like chaos. So there's the chaos in the world, all this superposed and patterns of energy. And then we've evolved each animal with its own Umwelt to be sensitive to certain aspects of it. But there's also an internal rhythm, an internal chaos, that is a mirror to the external chaos. And to channel Peirce, but unlike either degenerate case of Peirce's evolution, stochastic chance and anacastic algorithm, in other words, stochastic chance would be stochastic or randomness in modern parlance, and anacastic algorithm, or the algorithms or law-like behaviors that are fixed in, again, our current cybernetic systems. Peirce says, quote, in genuine agapism, advance takes place by virtue of a positive sympathy among the created springing from the continuity of mind. So again, the maelstrom, both inside and outside, blurring the lines, the flow of these patterns, these continuous chaotic patterns, they're continuous, but in that continuity, in that seeming noise, there's this sparse order that can be intuited, that can be abducted as an original guess, an original hypothesis, to then be tested. And that this is a provisional answer to explain how it is, for example, the bee can do what it can do, and to begin to really carry out, I think, Breer's Cybersemiotic project. And this is just, I'm not going to explain this right now. We can talk about it if we have time or the desire. But this is my own project's approach to really capturing and really committing to the abyssal, really committing to the noise, really committing to the chaos, and that it's both inside and outside, and that really surfing it, cultivating it. That it has to be on purpose part of the system, and that all these cybernetic systems I went through are, well, for lack of a better phrase, like a little overly fixed and a little overly focused on a priori, what is the solution? No, we need abduction. We need abductive inference, and that has to be discovered out of the maelstrom. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh.
All this, yeah. Cool.
Brilliant.
Thank you. Thank you.
Questions and comments for Josh? In the chat, you'll see I threw a little prompt down there. You'll recall we read Haraway, we read also Sean Cubitt.